And we are live.
And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com. And of course, they have great locations all over Northeast Florida. And as always, thank you to the great folks at Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for bringing this edition of the Gator Bytes podcast. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. You, presumably, are Florida Gator fans coming off what I'd call it a gut-wrenching loss in Knoxville, the end of the Graham Mertz era, unfortunately due to injury. But now, Graham, we get to see the beginning of the DJ Lagway era as far as a starter tomorrow night against Kentucky. First and foremost, man, glad to be with you. And have you gotten over the overtime loss in Knoxville yet last week?
No, I have not. I was, if anybody watched Dylan Denmark and I's reaction show on Saturday, I was fuming angry. Then I'm not fuming angry anymore because at some point you just can't be fuming angry anymore. But am I over it? I am not. I hate Tennessee so much. I have a lot of Tennessee connections, so that game is a little bit extra personal for me. That's the first part. That's more of a personal problem. On the actual Gator football side of things, the reason I'm not over it, Hack, and the reason that I was especially agitated over this game, it's probably the most clear game in the Billy Napier era that it was the coaching specifically that let them down and just proved that Billy Napier does not belong in this era or does not belong in this tier of college football. A different coach on that sideline that day, the Gators win that game by, I think, 20-plus points. They step on the throats at halftime. They run away with it. Instead of 3-0 at halftime, it's 17 or 21-0. And then they just maintain in the second half and beat them convincingly, probably by double digits or maybe even more. So for those reasons, I'm not over it. Frustrating loss. And I don't have faith at all in this coach anymore. Nothing.
Well, I think that, yes, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think it verified what a lot of us already knew.
Yes, correct.
That Billy is a terrible game day coach. A couple aspects to this. Number one, I'm not going to throw stones in a glass house. I was a kick the extra point guy at the end of the game.
I was too.
Because I didn't think Billy could draw up a play that would win the game. I thought they had a better chance. Maybe, Tennessee has a bad turnover in overtime or something. So I'm not going to.
Exactly my same thought process.
Having said that, though, Graham, I will say this. I had a buddy of mine text me right after the game, and this was in all caps. And it was like, that's kind of a good point. What was Billy's mantra coming in? Scared money don't make money, right? So he kind of went away from that and kicking the extra point there. I mean, he basically had 3 yards to win the game. Although, again, I can't criticize him for that because, like you said, me and you were both kick the extra point guys. I will annihilate him on the other things. Fourth and a credit card, literally a credit card. And you're on a jet sweep with, instead of sneaking the ball with your 6'3", 240-pound quarterback. I thought that was fascinating. And then the 12 players on the field for the field goal team, again, it's the same thing that happened against Arkansas last year. Nothing's been cleaned up. Nothing's been changed. Nothing's been improved. That is preposterous. Now, it's not Billy's fault that Mertz fumbled on the quarterback sneak. I guess my question is, why is Mertz running a quarterback sneak again when you have a big quarterback like Lagway? So there were so many things to question. I'm not going to kill him for the extra point because I would have done that. But the field goal and the 4th and an inch with the jet sweep, that is ridiculous.
So a couple things. I'll start with that conversion and work my way back. The conversion, I agree with you. Watching the game, I wanted them to kick it. I wanted them to just see what happens in overtime. But you just said, I'm not going to kill Billy for it. In that moment, in that vacuum, sure. Because, again, to your point, like, I was wanting them to kick the extra point too. My problem is the reason I wanted them to kick the extra point is because I had no faith they draw up something good to get the 2. If I had faith in this being a better play caller to give me a better chance, to give me a realistic chance to actually punch it in and get the 2 and ultimately win the game, then I probably would have wanted them to kick the 2. But I was positive they were going to run something stupid and not get it.
Real quick to that point, I would have been fascinated if Tennessee not called a timeout.
I know, me too.
I thought they went up there for the sole reason to try to get Tennessee to burn a timeout, which they ultimately did. I don't know what the heck that setup was on that 2-point play before Tennessee called the timeout. They had like all the linemen off to the left, and there was only one lineman in the middle. I mean, it was bizarre.
I believe they would have snapped the ball. I really, really do.
Fascinated to see what happens if that play would have gone on.
Knowing Billy Napier, knowing the kind of buffoonery that's gone on in his program since he's been the coach, I truthfully believe if Tennessee didn't call timeout, they would have snapped the ball. And who knows what would have happened. So that's the first thing. You said I'm not going to kill Billy for it. I am going to kill Billy for it because of the macro perspective. Because of the fact that I do not have faith in this man as a play caller on a 2-point conversion on the road. Got to have it to win the football game and get out of here with a win. I had literally no faith he was going to draw up something that was going to work. I was like 90+% sure they were not going to get the 2-point conversion if they went for it. That's why I wanted them to kick it, not because in that situation, typically, you should kick it. I think typically in that situation, you should go for it. It's just this coach, I don't believe in actually getting it. Backtracking a bit, the 4th and inches call, the 4th and credit card, as you called it, call, is one of, if not the worst play calls I've ever seen in my life.
It was horrible.
It was horrendous. Heck, your freshman quarterback, who has already scrambled pretty well in this drive, is 240 pounds, and he needs to get a credit card. And here's the thing, Hack. Unless Lagway fumbles the snap, there's legitimately no way he does not pick up that first down.
Right, because he's going to
literally, he could have not even gotten any yardage. But if he's just in the pile, the refs are just going to assume he got it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, Trey Wilson's your playmaker on offense, but that is not the time to do that. Horrendous call. Horrendous. There's no defense for that.
If it's 4th and 2, 4th and 3, different scenario. 4th and like less than an inch. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on. Like, what is that? In the 12 men on the field, let's get to the last one of the points. And I think that you hit it. That's the kind of the trifecta here with this game. How is this still a problem, Hack? How is this still a problem? And let me tell you why. Let me tell you how it's actually still a problem. I'll go ahead and answer my own question. The 12 men on the field is a frustrating call. It was a problem last year, so I was angry that was still happening, right? Can I tell you what was even more frustrating and more damning about it, though? If that on the sideline after that happens, knowing it's been a problem that has plagued you before, if that is Kirby Smart on that sideline, if that's Brian Kelly on that sideline, if that's Nick Saban on that sideline, if that's Lane Kiffin on the sideline, if that's Eli Drinkowitz on the sideline, if that's almost any other coach in the SEC, he's ripping someone on the sidelines. He's fuming. He's furious. He's beside himself. With Napier, it's still this ho-hum thing, like it's still very, analytical, and we'll figure it out, and we'll talk through it. No! Someone needs to be chewed out for this, bro. Your sideline is not terrified of you if they make this same mistake for the 100th time.
Yeah, I genuinely felt bad for the players because I thought the players played well enough to win. They competed their butts off. They gave everything they had. The defense ran out of gas. The offense couldn't do a whole lot after Mertz got hurt, and we'll get to Graham in a moment. Lagway made a great throw to DK to tie the game, but in the end, Tennessee was just too much, and I genuinely blame the coaching. That loss is 150% on Billy Napier. Quickly, before the future, before Kentucky and the Lagway talk, I want to, and I mentioned this on Hacker After Dark this week, Graham, I want to tip my cap and say thank you to Graham Mertz. I was wrong about Graham Mertz.
So was I.
I think a lot of people were wrong about Graham Mertz. If you want to be honest with yourself, I think there were a ton of people that are watching us right now and listening to us right now that were wrong about Graham Mertz. When this kid came from Wisconsin, a lot of us didn't know very much about him other than what our Big Ten brethren were telling us, and that he's terrible and Wisconsin's better off without him, and this guy sucks, and what's Florida doing, and yada, yada, yada. And shame on me, and I'll single myself out because I listened to a lot of that. I didn't form my own opinion until I actually saw Graham Mertz play last year. And he was good last year. His offensive line was getting him killed. Ultimately, his collarbone gave out towards the end of the year. And then again this year. I mean, Graham Mertz was not the problem. In Graham Mertz's career at Florida, only a year and a half, 26 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions, completed 74% of his passes for almost 3,700 yards. So I'll speak for myself. I am sorry to Graham Mertz. He was very good as the Florida Gator quarterback. It didn't result in a lot of wins because when the defense allows LSU and Kentucky to matter what the offense does. But a tip of the cap, a thank you to Graham Mertz for what he did for the University of Florida. I hated to see that injury. It's such a freak injury. It wasn't even hit. Ironically enough, it was on a touchdown pass. It's his final play as a Gator. But again, I think people, if they're honest with themselves, they were wrong about Graham Mertz. And I think most Gator fans should be very appreciative for what Graham Mertz gave this football team and this university over the last year and a half.
So Mertz had confirmed after the game that he tore his ACL a couple plays before the touchdown pass. It was the scramble that he had, and his knee got twisted up a little bit. It wasn't anything crazy, but I mean, it's still not anything wild. And then when he threw the touchdown pass, I think he knew that something was wrong. Yeah, so this is what I tweeted, Hack, because Graham Mertz did a little Twitter thing, said thank you, Gator Nation, all that. I quoted the tweet and said basically exactly what you just said. I said, probably never been more wrong about a player in my life. I was furious when the Gators got him out of the portal. Mertz, I owe you an apology, and thank you for being a bright light in dark days of Gator football. Oh. That's pretty much what he's been, right? I mean, last year, to your point, the defense couldn't stop a nosebleed, but if they could have, I mean, you probably would have won 8, maybe 9 games last year with Mertz at the helm.
You definitely beat Kentucky. You definitely beat Missouri, and you definitely beat LSU if they had any defense last year.
Yeah. So, look, and, you know, earlier this season, you and I had the argument. You wanted to keep Mertz in, and I wanted them to move on with Lagway, and you were right, because you were right that they were better with Mertz. And my whole thing back then was I thought that they didn't have any hope, regardless of who was at quarterback. But that turned out to be wrong, because if Mertz doesn't get hurt in that Tennessee game, I think without question they end up winning. And there will probably be games moving forward where that will be true as well. If I had to guess, Georgia and Texas are kind of in their own bucket. I don't think they're going to win those games regardless, but we'll have to see how the games play out. But between Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, seeing however they play out, if I had to guess, Hack, at some point we will be doing this Gator Bytes podcast after whatever of those games, saying, man, if Mertz was playing, they probably win that football game. So, yeah, basically moving on with it, Mertz, it was great to have him. He was a great addition. Sucks that his Gator career ends the way it did. But a bright light in dark days of Gator football. I will have nothing but good things to say about Graham Mertz moving forward and what he did in a Gator uniform. Now it's time. It's time to see what you got in the future, and it's time to get him as much experience as possible. Hicken brought up a point on his show that I thought was interesting, and I think is fair to point out. Now that you don't have Mertz and you just have Lagway, quarterback depth becomes a real concern now.
You have nobody except walk-ons after this.
And you have nobody, and you're about to have to go against Kentucky's defensive line, Georgia's defensive line, Texas's defensive line, LSU's defensive line, Ole Miss's defensive line. If I had to guess, Hack, I think we're going to see unfortunately, because it wasn't a fun watch. But I think we might be seeing a little bit of the Anthony Richardson 2022 play calling, where you have a guy that's an electric runner. Lagway's not the same runner Richardson was, but I think they're going to intentionally keep him out of harm's way in a lot of games.
That's a good point. Let's get to Lagway. Let's get to Florida, Kentucky, and what the future is going to hold. In a moment, Southeast Orthopedic Specialists brings you the Gator Bytes podcast here on 1010XL and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Southeast Orthopedic Specialists has been with us for years. You can listen to the good Dr. Kevin Murphy on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan on the drill for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. And again, Southeast Orthopedic Specialists, their website, se-ortho.com. The good folks at Southeast Orthopedic Specialists bring you the Gator Bytes podcast. I agree with what you said. There's not a lot of depth. Actually, there's no depth behind DJ Lagway, which is a shame, because I do believe he might be handcuffed a little bit with what they want to do with him, because they have no choice. Having said that, that's why I'm so intrigued about tomorrow night, because arguably the most winnable game you have left is tomorrow night. I know Florida State, but I still say Doak Campbell Stadium.
I disagree with that. I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're not as old as I am. You didn't live through hell in Tallahassee every 2 years in the 90s and early to mid 2000s. So
have you watched them play this year?
Yeah. Have you watched Florida at times this year?
They're not as bad as Florida State.
Well,
Florida can complete a forward pass, and it doesn't feel like a miracle.
This will be, and it'll be interesting in the chat, this will be an age thing. I'm willing to bet people your age will agree with you. People my age will agree with me. I'm telling you.
I don't think so. I think most people in this chat think the Florida State's the most winnable game, because I don't disagree with you normally with Doak Campbell Stadium, but that stadium's under renovation. They don't have nearly the amount of people that's normally there. And that program is as wounded as it can possibly be. I don't agree with that at all, actually.
Good. Save this audio, cut it up, and let's replay it around Thanksgiving weekend. And we'll see who's right and who's wrong. But we'll get there. But seriously, save this, because I want this as a receipt for when they might lose to Florida State in Tallahassee. But it is Kentucky on Saturday. Kentucky is so Jekyll and Hyde. It's odd. It's weird. This Kentucky team got boat raced at home by South Carolina. They lost at home last week, albeit to a good Vanderbilt team. But then they almost beat Georgia, and they do go into Oxford and beat Ole Miss. I mean, who really knows what Kentucky team you're getting, other than the fact that we know Kentucky hates Florida. We know they've won 3 in a row in this series, and we know they probably smell blood in the water with the true freshman quarterback in DJ Lagway. So I don't think it's an easy game, but it is absolutely the most winnable game, at least until Florida State.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you hit the nail on the head with Kentucky, that they are very Jekyll and Hyde. And I actually think that plays into Florida's favor, Hack, because from watching Kentucky this year, what I've noticed out of them, they feel a little Muschampy when Muschamp was at Florida, in terms of, it feels like they play up to their competition and they play down to their competition. Would you agree with me on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Georgia and Ole Miss game are prime examples of that. Although the interesting thing last week was a big game. Even though it was Vanderbilt was coming off the win over Alabama. Kentucky was coming off a bye week. I mean, that was a pretty big game. And I watched some of that game, and I thought Kentucky was, quite frankly, not very good. So I agree with you for the most part, but last week was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah. I think really what it comes down to is, regardless of how well they play on that specific day, one thing you can guarantee about Kentucky this year is it's going to be an ugly game.
Yeah.
Every game they play is ugly and disgusting to watch, and it's just rock fights. So I think when they play really good opponents like Georgia, there's a world where you can keep that game close, because you can just muddy it up and limit possessions. And if you get Georgia off the field a couple of times and you stay on the field for a while, it's going to just naturally result in the game. At the end of it, you're going to have a shot, because it's not a shootout game where somebody can get up 2-3 scores or whatever. I think it's going to be a similar game. Obviously, Florida's not nearly as good as Georgia, but I think this is going to be a game, Hack, where you're going to look up in the third quarter, midway through the third quarter, and you say, damn, like Florida's only had the ball 5 times or whatever. It's going to be that limited possession type of game. And basically every game Kentucky's played this year, the difference in them winning and losing has been the team, Kentucky and whoever they're playing, the team that just finishes in the red zone, finishes once they cross the 50, is the team that wins the game. And, I'm kind of just describing football in a lot of ways. The team that finishes typically wins, but even more so with Kentucky just because possessions are so limited. I think Florida's going to have long drives. I think Kentucky's going to have long drives. Which long drive ends up in a field goal, which long drive ends up in a touchdown, that will be the difference in this football game, in my opinion.
To me, if Florida wants any shot at a bowl game, if that's the goal, right, to make it to a bowl game, which would be an improvement off of last year, because they didn't go to a bowl game last year, you absolutely have to win this game. And I don't know if Florida's going to go to a bowl game regardless. They'd still have to find 2 more wins in the last 5. But if they beat Kentucky, and let's say they do beat Florida State, although I think it's going to be a lot tougher than you do, then they would have to steal 1 of LSU, Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas, which is conceivable. If they lose to Kentucky, they're not going to a bowl game because they're not going to beat 2 out of LSU, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Texas.
Yeah.
So if you want a bowl game, if you want those 15 extra practices, if you want to experience Gator football in mid to late December at some bowl venue, this is a game you absolutely have to win. It's a game they can win. There is still something to be said for a night game at the Swamp, right? We saw that against UCF. It's under the lights tomorrow night, 7:45 on the SEC network. I imagine the Swamp will be rocking, or I hope it is anyway. I would expect it to be. And yeah, I mean, this is a game you absolutely have to win. It's a winnable game. It's a game you need to win. And if they don't win it, then again, we're having that conversation in the fourth quarter tomorrow night. Is this Billy Napier's final game in Gainesville? At this point, I don't think they're going to fire him until the end of the year. I don't know what purpose that would serve at least anymore. If you're going to do it, it would have to be after Kentucky, right? Because then that's the 2-week break until Georgia. I think Billy gets till the end of the year unless tomorrow night's an absolute catastrophe. But I'm kind of leaning Florida to win, Graham. And I guess the reason why is I'm not sure if I'm going to pick them the rest of the year. So if I want to pick Florida to win another game, it probably has to be tomorrow night.
Yeah, I'm not picking them to win, unfortunately. I think if Mertz, which is crazy, it's a crazy 180 to have this conversation, thinking about the conversation we had before the Texas A&M game. You were right in that conversation. I've already told you were right about this, and I was wrong. Because back then I wanted them to just ride with Lagway and make it happen and let's move. But now I'm going to go the opposite on that, and I'm going to say that I'm not going to pick them to win because Mertz isn't playing. It's just the matchup to me, especially. I think Mertz would have done better in this matchup because, again, what we just talked about, long drives. This is a game of long drives. Mertz is king of long drives. That's his deal, right? He's 4 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards, 8 yards, 5 yards, scramble, keep the chains moving, stay on the field, eventually punch it in. Lagway's going to want to go down the field. Kentucky's got a very good defense, and I think they know that. So that worries me a little bit. Does Lagway throw another bad interception like he did against Tennessee, just trying to make a play that wasn't necessarily there when there was another profit to be made on that play?
What are your realistic expectations for Lagway beginning tomorrow night and for the rest of the year?
The main thing, Hack, is he's clearly, even though you were a Mertz guy, I think you obviously agree, he's clearly ridiculously talented.
Sure he is. Absolutely.
Unbelievably talented. One of the most gifted quarterbacks Florida's recruited here in some time.
I mean, that throw to DK, people are not talking about it because obviously the Gators lost. That is an enormous throw in front of 100,000 on a Saturday night against the top 10 rival. I mean, freshmen don't come in and do that very often. No. Now, again, it has not been a big story because of the way the game ended and all the other nonsense that went on beforehand. But that was a big, big boy throw by DJ Lagway.
It was. And I think if you're just talking talent and what God attached to their right arm, you probably have to go back to Will Greer, probably a guy that you felt like could make those types of throws that Lagway was able to make. Would you agree with me there?
And Anthony Richardson was a top 5 pick.
Yeah, you're right.
But I hear you. You're not too far. I mean, he's got a lot of talent. I mean, he's the Gatorade Player of the Year in high school for a reason.
Yeah, because Anthony Richardson wasn't a recruit like that.
No.
He showed up and had that ability. I'm talking like hype coming into the program.
Anthony Richardson was a very late bloomer, to be honest.
Yeah, correct. So, anyways, we could have that debate. That's a separate conversation. My expectations, to answer your question for the rest of the year, my expectations, Zach, are for him to get better every week. If he made that bad mistake against Tennessee, maybe like don't make that against Kentucky, or don't make that later on in the season. Like, just gradually progress and learn how to not just be a talented phenom, not just make those ridiculous throws like he did DK, but manage the offense. Control, be in control, know what to do. And he already knows what he's doing. I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing, but just that type of extra knowledge of what comes with playing the position. And then by the end of the year,
you manage the game, take what the defense gives you, that sort of thing, which Mertz was a master at, by the way.
Yes. So if you can get to by like the Ole Miss FSU game, and you can say, man, Lagway knows this offense like the back of his hand. He's delivering throws when they got to be delivered. He's taking the profit when something deeper down the field isn't there. And then the other kind of flip side of this, and every coach that's good with quarterbacks talks about this, act. The non-sexy plays is going to be a factor, I think. I think it's natural when you're the Gatorade Player of the Year, you're told that you're going to be the savior of this program. It's now your team because Mertz is out. I think it's natural to say, I want to show off this rocket arm and I want to be explosive and chunk plays down the field constantly. When it's there, by all means, go make them. When it isn't there on 2nd and 5, throw it away. Let's live to see another down. Like those types of plays, when there could be someone down the field, but they're probably double covered and a safety's probably going to jump that route and pick it off. So I'm going to throw this check down instead and go get 6 and keep the chains moving. Those types of plays. So really, I guess the one-word answer to the long answer I just gave you is I'm looking for him to slowly but surely gain maturity that you can only gain from being on the field.
I totally agree. And let's give our final thoughts on Florida, Kentucky in a moment. I want to get to the rest of the action around locally as far as the two big ones in the SEC as well. Again, Southeast Orthopedic Specialists brings you the Gator Bytes podcast here on 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. And I guess we're all over, right? We're all over the MyBookie digital platform, YouTube, Twitter as well. We certainly appreciate everybody involved for watching Gator Bytes. And again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for bringing you this edition as they have for years and years and years. Go to se-ortho.com. They're Northeast Florida's best when it comes to what they do. And again, Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. All right. Tonight, gotta love Friday night college football. Give me a break. I don't know why the ACC does it. It irritates me every year, but here we are. Florida State, Duke. Seminoles coming off a bye. They begin their second half of the year. They've never lost to Duke, Graham, as in like ever in the history of planet Earth in football. They've never lost to Duke. The historic Wallace Wade Stadium will be rocking tonight with 22,000, I'm sure. I think Florida State's going to win tonight. I don't know why I think that. I just do. I think they, in the second half against Clemson, thought they were all right. They clearly played one of their best halves of football. I mean, they were down 17-0 before you blinked in that game. And what was the final? Like 29-13? I mean, they basically outscored Clemson after that initial 17-0 opening 10 minutes. At some point, Florida State's just too good. They're not going to be 1-10 or I guess 1-11 or 2-10. I don't think so. They're going to win a game or two in the second half of the year. I think it might start tonight against Duke, a Duke team that, even though their record's good, I don't think they're as good as their record would indicate.
Florida State loses that game, in my opinion. They are so bad, man. They are so bad. I have zero faith in them. I think they stink. I think the Gators are going to beat them.
You think they're going to be 2-10? They beat Charleston Southern, they lose to everybody else.
Yeah.
Wow, because I mean, this game tonight, I mean, they're not going to win in Miami. They're not going to win at Notre Dame. They got North Carolina at home and Florida at home in this game tonight, other than Charleston Southern. I mean, maybe I'm blinded by the spear on the helmet and the garnet and gold, but I just cannot imagine a world where they're 2-10. Maybe you'll be right though.
I'll give them 3 wins. I'll give them 3.
All
so
right,
between Duke, North Carolina, and the Gators, they'll win one of them, but it won't be the Gators. So between Duke and North Carolina, they'll win one of them. So I'll give them 3.
So Florida State, Duke. Quickly tomorrow, Miami goes to Louisville. Do the Canes have any problems there?
They've had problems the last 2 weeks they've been on the field.
They survived the last 2 games.
Survived, man. Survived. You could argue that they should have lost both games, and like I know they should have lost. You could argue they should have lost both games in general, but you could argue that like a call, like an officiating call, kept them from losing both games.
I'll tell you this, though, the ACC helped them tomorrow. That's a noon kick. If that was a 7 o'clock kick or an 8 o'clock kick in Louisville, that's a lot tougher than a noon kick.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. The Virginia Tech game, if you think it's a catch, then you think Miami got screwed. I didn't think it was a catch, but more so the Cal game. Heck, I'm sure you stayed up and watched that game. That was targeting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, even so, you can't blow a 35-10 lead at home against a team that traveled 2,700 miles or whatever.
No, I know that. I know that. I'm just strictly talking like you could argue that Miami has gotten bailed out 2 weeks in a row by a call that should have gone differently. And that aside, yes, I don't think they're that good, to be honest. They're obviously better than Florida. They came into the swamp and murdered Florida. I'm not saying that they're obviously a top 10 team, top 15 team. Cam Ward is going to play in the NFL next year. He's special. If they play somebody of consequence, which won't be till the end of the season, they have not played a ranked team yet. A team that's currently ranked, they have not played one.
Well, Louisville's not currently ranked, but Louisville's, for ACC standards, Louisville's not half bad. I think Miami better come to play tomorrow.
You just said it, for ACC standards.
Yeah.
They don't play good football teams this year, man. And I think Louisville can give them problems. I tend to think that at some point down the stretch, they're going to cough up one. They've been begging to do so for the last 2 times they've played. So
it'll be curious tomorrow. That's a noon kick. That'll start your day. Then let's go to 3:30 in, I believe, Neyland tomorrow, right? It's in Knoxville. Alabama, Tennessee. You got to wonder if this is an elimination game. Somebody's going to have 2 losses. The thing with Tennessee, if they lose, that means they basically have to win out, which includes beating Georgia at the end of the year. Alabama, after tomorrow, still has games against Missouri and LSU. It might not necessarily be an elimination game, Graham, but it's pretty close to one for the loser tomorrow between the Crimson Tide and the Volunteers.
I think it is. It's an elimination game. To me, I mean, there's going to be too many other teams in consideration, I think.
Probably. I think a 10-2 Alabama with wins over Georgia, and in our hypothetical, even if they lose to Tennessee, wins over Georgia, LSU, Missouri. I think it would be hard to keep that brand out for the committee at 10-2. I think it would be easier to keep Tennessee out at 10-2. But again, if Tennessee loses tomorrow, then they have to win out, which includes beating Georgia. So it's probably a much more important game for Tennessee, although it's a vital game for both. Who do you like?
I like Bama.
Yeah. Tennessee was not impressive last week, although Alabama survived South Carolina last week. So neither team was very impressive.
Yeah, but Tennessee was supposed to be this high. Nico Iamaleava is not very good.
No, I agree. He did not show me a lot.
So I like Bama.
The game of the week is tomorrow night, Georgia and Texas. Boy, Georgia already lost to Alabama by a field goal. Now they got to go to Texas. Is it an elimination game for the Dogs? Close to it, right?
Close to it, and I think they lose. They're going to get a little bit of street cred, though, down the stretch because of who they've been the last couple of years. So I wouldn't totally call it an elimination game yet, but it will make it to where every game they play the rest of the year will become an elimination game, in my opinion.
I actually think Georgia might go in there and win. I don't think Georgia played very well against Mississippi State. They haven't played very well in a lot of games this year. They really haven't put it all together except for about a quarter against Alabama. And I guess Clemson, the beginning of the year, they were outstanding. But since that Clemson game, their best quarter was against Alabama where they were getting killed and all of a sudden took the lead. At some point, there's too much talent on that team. They're going to put it all together at some point. Why not tomorrow night on a huge stage against the number one team in the country? So give me the Dogs over Texas. I assume you're taking the Longhorns?
Wow. Yeah, I'm taking Texas.
All right, I'll take Georgia. You'll take Texas.
Yeah.
And finally, as we wrap up, back to Florida, Kentucky. I think you and I disagree on this one as well. Give me the Gators, and maybe I got the orange and blue blinders on here. We'll see. But I don't think I'm going to be able to pick Florida until Florida State minimum. I just want to pick Florida to at least win another game. I'm not picking them to beat Georgia or Texas or LSU or Ole Miss. I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I hope they win. I think they might win. And based on that alone, I'll pick them to win tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think they might win as well, but I think they probably won't. So I'm gonna take the Wildcats.
Well, regardless of what happens, we'll be back next week to kind of review the first half of the year, start previewing the 5-game gauntlet, which begins, of course, 2 weeks from tomorrow with the cocktail party. Thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for bringing you Gator Bytes, 1010XL.com, and the 1010XL social media platform. That is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. Graham, appreciate you, brother. We'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir.